Hi, and welcome to the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy's 10th anniversary celebration. I'm Alejandra Serna Rios, director of the center. We have a lot to celebrate about the center's first decade, and I'm excited to bring in folks who can tell us about the ways that our work supported the creation of a child tax credit and Medicaid expansion, as well as preventing tax policies that would have drained revenue for public schools and other critical investments. I want to tell you first about how grateful I am that the center team was able to help preserve the state's grocery tax credit in the marathon legislative session that just ended. Early on, a major tax cut package emerged that would have eliminated this essential credit, which is especially valuable to households of modest means because they can take the credit even when they're working but their wages are too low to owe income taxes. The center made the case about why the credit was so important in a time of pandemic-induced recession, and when the tax benefits of the bill went overwhelmingly to the wealthiest Idahoans and out-of-state shareholders. While we inform policymaking by hitting major media like Idaho Reports and newspaper editorial boards, we also worked closely with our partners in food security to educate policymakers about the critical role this credit plays. Together, we drove engagement from everyday people who would have been impacted by the loss of this critical credit. And fortunately, the next versions of the major tax legislation left the grocery credit untouched. Not only that, but the package that was ultimately approved also spared about $68 million in ongoing revenue loss, public dollars that are being instead put toward roads and bridges, health, and other policy priorities. More than ever, fiscal policy is about kitchen table economics, as well as the dollars we have to invest as a state. I am so pleased we have stayed true to our roots in this regard, working in deep partnership with community-based organizations. And I could not be prouder to build on the reputation we have built as an independent, data-driven policy wonks and continue together to venture into new strategies for influencing economic policy in our state. I'll tell you more about our recent successes and bright future towards the end of this program. Up next are remarks from several Idahoans that reflect on the center's journey, including nonprofit and business leader Lynn Hoffman, former center directors Mike Ferguson and Lauren Necochea, and board members like Bev Herod, among other captivating people. First, I want to thank our tireless parent nonprofit, Janus Inc., and its co-director Karen Tucker and Stephanie Benderkitz, as well as the Janus board. I want to thank our own advisory board here at the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, as well as our staff. And I want to also thank you and the hundreds of Idahoans who support our work through individual gifts. We could not do this work without you. So stay tuned and thank you. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for joining me for a view into the origins of the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy. Now, at the time the center was an idea around 2009, you were serving as executive director of the Idaho Nonprofit Center, a position you held from about 2007 to 2013. And in that role, you served as a convener for the early conversations around the center. First of all, I want to let you know how grateful we are for the ways that you've supported and shaped the concept from the beginning. And for the benefit of everybody listening today, I also want to ask a few questions about how the center came together. So in your role as director of the Nonprofit Center, you must have been familiar with lots of mission-based initiatives. What made the concept for the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy stand out to you?
Well, thank you, Alejandra. And first of all, congratulations on your 10th anniversary. I am so excited that this organization has been so successful and so influential over these years. When we started gathering in 2009, it really was a gathering of nonprofit leaders who were frustrated that we couldn't influence some of the foundational tax and other policies that we felt were affecting the economic success of all Idahoans. It was a huge issue. And so we started talking about what was needed and how we might go about setting up something like this here. And you know, in our conversation, we talked a lot about the realities of Idaho and, you know, the fact that we needed to make sure that this was based here in Idaho, that we were working with local people, that we really were focused on high integrity data and analysis. And so that started a really interesting about 8 months process where we created a steering committee to start with. That steering committee then we created a set of community engagement and with public speakers that we brought from national organizations to really start exploring this idea with nonprofit leaders, what a fiscal analysis center might look like and what value it might bring to their work specifically. And we went back to Northwest Area Foundation and said, we think we want to start a fiscal analysis organization. But to do that, we really need to go out and talk now to other people than nonprofits. We get we have a need, but now we have to see, would the people who would use this data, will they be receptive to this? And then ultimately, will funders fund this? And so they gave us a second grant, and we hired a contractor, Taryn McGreeny, and she and I actually, but mostly she, went all over the state. We talked to current legislators, former legislators, lobbyists, all kinds of people throughout the state, and basically asked the question, if we had this kind of data, would it be useful? How would we present it to you so that it could be actionable? A whole set of things. And I was really pleased to find at the end of all of that we got a very positive response back from legislators and others.
Thank you, Lynn. It's very fitting that the process was very data driven and that lots of folks were consulted and very true to that still the mission of the Center for Fiscal Policy, which is really to lead with credible facts and to make sure that analysis is on solid ground. And so I guess what I want to turn to next is really asking you about what were some of the key attributes or ingredients that you felt that a fiscal policy center in Idaho would, or the people you consulted with felt really strongly about. Would it have to be structured a certain way? Would it have to be led by a certain individual in the beginning? Tell us a little bit about what was needed from day one.
One of the things, so when we decided to move forward and approached Northwest Area Foundation actually for the third time, and this would be for the grant to actually start the center, we at that time determined that we would model ourselves on the State Fiscal Analysis Initiative that was being led by the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities back in Washington, D.C. We would not be an organization that could be successfully funded if it didn't have some sort of a fiscal sponsor. And so as we looked at this, and the steering committee and I went through a careful, thoughtful process to think about who would be the appropriate fiscal sponsor for an organization like this. And we really came down to two. We came down to the nonprofit center. However, we were small, we were a pretty small organization at that time. And, we had all of the right, I would say, the policy chops, but we didn't have the right infrastructure, grant writers and some other things. And so the other organization we looked to was Mountain States Group. And it had all of the infrastructure and everything else, but at that time, the board and the organization was very reluctant. In fact, they had a policy that said that you couldn't lobby. And so they asked us at the time, is this organization going to lobby? And I said, well, yes, in some fashion, it probably will lobby.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And definitely, I think over the years, Mountain States Group, now known as Janus, and the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy have have deepened, the both the infrastructure and then the policies that support the work that we're able to do at the State House as well. And so it was a very good match in the end. And I'm glad that you and the organizers had the wisdom to see that could come together in that way. So thank you. And yes, and I would agree that the infrastructure here includes the ability to, ask local communities and civically minded folks, if they were willing to also support the center through gifts, if they felt, that the mission was a good one and that we were doing good work in Idaho, which was also a very strategic choice. So Lynn, earlier with our team, you shared that The work that you did to set up the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy was really what you consider to be, one of your your finest accomplishments as the director of the Idaho Nonprofit Center. And my question really is just tell us more about that and why you feel that way.
I look at what the organization started and then has become as truly being able to influence some things that make a difference in everybody's life in Idaho. And I think it has stayed so true to its roots of being nonpartisan, of being factual, of being data driven, all of those good things that we hoped it would be, but really shining a light on some issues that just have not been, highlighted in the past. It's not something that our part-time legislature, has a lot of information about. And I think it's so important to be able to deliver credible data so that they can look at policies in a broader light.
So my last question for you, Lynn, really is what would you like to, do you have any tips for us about the next 10 years or any wishes for us going forward?
I think, there's been a lot of turmoil in the state legislature this year, but other years as well. There's always a difficult balance to be able to look at business interests, to look at small government, to look at big government, to look at, all these different policies. And I think it's important for the center to continue to push to have really the focus of the legislature be, how do we improve the lives of Idahoans? How do we improve the economic life, but the personal life, the quality of life in Idaho in the greatest way possible? And I think the center can continue to push on those kinds of issues that really broadens the perspective of the legislature so that we are taking a wide view and not just some narrow interests of certain sectors, but really fundamentally, how is it that Idaho can be a great state for all Idahoans? And I think you're doing a great job, and I think you can continue to do that work.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'm right there with you. And every day, at the center, we do think about, what are the priorities of our communities as a whole and how can we get there? It's certainly a really important question today and will be going forward. So Lynn, I really truly enjoyed the time we got to visit today and for me to learn more about the origins of the center. I want to thank you once again for the work you did to get us started. And as a person who, works both in the public sector and the private sector and different sectors, you're a person with a lot of insight into, what works in the state. And so thank you so much for your time and for your best wishes, and take care.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandro, and thank you for all the work that you and the center is continuing to do. It's terrific to have you in this leadership position, and congratulations on your 10-year anniversary.
Thank you, Alejandra and Lynn, for that insight into the origins of the center. Hi, I'm Sue Lovelace, Advisory Board Member for the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy. We would like to continue tracing the impact of the center by chatting with Mike Ferguson, the founding director of Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy. Before becoming director, Mike was Idaho's chief economist for 25 years. He worked in the governor's budget office under 6 different administrations. He retired from state government during the beginning of Butch Otter's 2nd term as governor. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you, Sue.
So you came off a long career analyzing revenue in Idaho and hold an expert understanding of budget and legislative processes very well. At the time you were ready to retire from state government, what did you feel was missing in that process?
Well, even long before I was ready to retire, I long felt that there needed to be some kind of an independent outside of government entity that would basically look over the shoulders of the governor and the legislature when it comes to fiscal matters and have a basically objective perspective, a non-political perspective on that. And I was thrilled when I learned that the Northwest Area Foundation was considering funding such an effort in Idaho.
Great. So while you served as director, the center developed groundbreaking research that demonstrated how the Great Recession and an increased reliance on property taxes to fund schools affected Idaho's education funding plan. You ended up taking a longer history of public school funding that revealed some important trends. Tell us about that.
Well, during my career as the chief economist, I focused primarily on the revenue side of the ledger. Once I became director of the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, obviously I needed to look much more closely at the expenditure side. And what I realized is that there wasn't a whole lot of historical data in a usable form that was available to analyze the expenditure side. Things like public schools, higher education, the health insurance that the state provides funding for. And so I undertook an effort with volunteers to try to put together a consistent historical database that allowed analysis of where we had been, because it's kind of hard to recommend where you're going without knowing where you've been. And what I found was that the data was extremely difficult to analyze and digest, because the Division of Financial Management, the executive branch agency that did the budget, and the Legislative Budget Office, the legislature's agency that did the budget work, they used different definitions. They reported different information. It wasn't consistent across those two agencies. Also, a lot of the information was based on things like, what were the appropriations? The appropriation 10 years ago or 10 years prior didn't really matter to me. I wanted to see what the actual expenditures were, because that's the ground truth. And that's what I believe is really important. So being sort of data oriented, I undertook an effort with volunteers, because it was pretty massive, to try to put together a data set that documented Idaho's historical expenditures by functional area and by revenue category. And it was enormously helpful in terms of providing information to both the legislature and the public on where Idaho stood. And well, the big area was education funding, because it was shocking to me what it showed.
And I'm sure it was critical to those school superintendents out in our towns to know, what had happened to their revenue over time.
It was really interesting. I got to know quite a few of the state's superintendents in the individual districts, and they understood how difficult the situation they faced because of the funding limitations. What I was able to show them is how broad that was, how pervasive it was. And I can't tell you how many times I gave a presentation to a group of regional superintendents and their eyes bulged with the information that they were getting. And I think it helped them understand that they were all pretty much in the same boat. Another thing that I tried to put some focus on was the degree to which education funding in Idaho was extremely inequitable. And part of that had to do with under Jim Risch, when he was the temporary governor for, I think, about 9 months, he enacted he and the legislature enacted House Bill 1, which took the M&O levy away from the school funding. And that was the equalization levy. So now the districts were basically faced with their state appropriation and whatever property taxes that they could scrounge through supplemental levies. But the property values per student across I think it was about 115 school districts, was vastly different. I remember, I think the Blackfoot district had about 150,000 of market value per student. McCall Donnelly had $4.5 million of market value per student. You can quickly realize what that meant in terms of funding for public schools.
The center was also established in part to provide budget information to nonprofits and service providers. Tell us about how the center helped make sense of trends for that sector.
Well, in terms of providing information for a broader array of public services, one of the areas is obviously healthcare. That's a major part of the state's budget. Also, there are considerable expenditures for things like corrections. So being able to show the actual data on how Idaho is performing, both relative to its own past and relative to other states, helps in terms of making a case where it needs to be made for proper funding.
When the center was first established, the focus was on influencing decision-making solely with credible, independent analysis and information. At times, though, a bolder approach was needed. For example, tell us about times where the center was more pointed in its approach.
Well, I think an example would be putting Governor Otter on the spot with a fairly tough question. And to his credit, he definitely gave what I believe was an honest answer. I was invited to meet with the speaker over some tax policy matters that he was getting information and conveying it publicly from DFM, my former agency, that was simply incorrect. And I was able to go in, have a private meeting, show him why the numbers weren't legit or in error. And so we were able to straighten that out. But for the most part, it was providing information that hopefully, and I think it succeeded, others could use to make the cases that they were concerned with and present that information to the appropriate audiences.
Great. So who were some of the other folks who helped get the center off its feet, and what were their roles?
Well, Lynn Hoffman was kind of the founder, I think. She was engaged early on. And there were others. I mean, Jerry Evans, having Jerry Evans, former, I think 16-year tenure as superintendent of public instruction in Idaho and a Republican, was fantastic. And I had actually worked with Jerry Evans while I was chief economist back in the days that there was a thing called the Steelhead Coalition, a coalition of Democrats and moderate Republicans who were focused on funding education. Rich Toney, a banker in Boise, brought a perspective from the financial services industry. Jasper was an economics professor at the College of Idaho, and their different life experiences and professional experiences brought perspectives that I didn't have. And it was always good to hear those different perspectives and those different views in the advisory committee meetings.
Well, we want to thank you for everything you did to get the center started, Mike. It truly is an asset to Idaho, and the good work continues. Old Idahoans like me, as well as newcomers and the new generation, truly appreciate more than ever credible sources. So take care and happy travels.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. After its founding and establishment as a high-quality fiscal policy think tank, the center continued influencing public fiscal policy during a turbulent time in tax and budget policy in our state. I joined the board in these years and saw firsthand how the center's rigorous analysis and willingness to speak up about important trends continued to benefit Idaho. Year after year, major tax cut legislation popped up, and the center was there to make sense of the stakes. When the center found that one of these tax cut proposals would cost much more than previously thought, the bill died, and its sponsor gave the reasons as the bad stuff got out. And so it went for other revenue-sucking proposals. At the same time, Idaho was able to use this revenue to make investments in literacy programs, teacher pay, healthcare, and other critical needs. The center also launched new research into higher education funding and criminal justice system funding. The center also took an influential role in healthcare financing, analyzing bills that would expand Medicaid. While preserving revenue in these years gave the state the ability to invest, it was in 2018 that the center began making an impact in proactive tax policy. After much dialogue about a new child tax credit, the center released an analysis that showed the credit's small size would not be equitable to larger families. The credit was revised to provide a greater benefit. The center also hosted the first and possibly only gubernatorial debate between Brad Little and Paulette Jordan at the College of Idaho. I want to thank Lauren Necachia and Alejandra Serna-Rios for their leadership during this time. Lauren served as director and Alejandra as policy director while many critical issues unfolded in our state.
I was thrilled 10 years ago to be part of the founding of the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, and I'm so incredibly proud of the work that the center has done over these last 10 years.
Congratulations to the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy on 10 years of great work. The center is an invaluable resource for providing the analysis of complex issues that directly impact the most vulnerable communities and individuals in our state.
As someone who works and advocates for our public school systems in Idaho, tax policy and research is something critical to the conversation. I could not do the work that I do or have the knowledge I do on tax policy proposals without the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy.
Most of us taxpayers out here are low or moderate income taxpayers. We don't have 10 or 15 business lobbies who are working to ensure that taxes are in our favor. So it's really, so the center, I feel like, really provides some way to get some equity in that, to really get some balance to, the discussion about taxes.
I think it gives an opportunity to many people to understand what fiscal policy means. It gives the opportunity to people who otherwise would not be listening.
Paulette of Idaho is a partner with Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, and we organize the Latinx and immigrant community in Idaho around immigrants' rights issues, education policy, and economic policy. Paulette has been in partnership with the center and their important work for less than a year, but we look forward to building our partnership in the following 10 years and beyond.
I am so proud that I got to be a part of the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, and I'm so thrilled with just the fantastic talent that is carrying the mission forward, continuing to speak the truth and let Idaho voters know what's really going on and hold policymakers accountable.
Their work in areas such as Medicaid expansion and the grocery tax and other areas related to food insecurity is critical. As we reflect on the last 10 years and look to the future, the center's work on food insecurity will become incredibly more important. Their commitment to tackling this issue in a holistic way helps us address challenges in a constantly changing environment to better understand those we serve through the Idaho Food Bank.
From fighting ill-advised tax cuts to advancing Medicaid expansion, the work of the center has had a profound effect on the lives of tens, hundreds of thousands of Idahoans.
So I think, really what the center does is provide, what I feel like is unbiased, reliable research that gives people the information they need, and legislators and other policymakers the information they need to make good decisions.
The Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy has supported us as an education stakeholder in understanding the implications of tax policy and if proposals hinder the ability for our members to be able to provide the necessary resources to the students in our public schools.
If we are ever going to push through this era of misinformation and weaponized misinformation for political gain, it's going to be because of organizations like the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy.
Together, we have reached out to marginalized communities about how tax policy and budget issues affect their daily lives. We look forward to continuing this tradition and informing Idaho leadership and the many communities that call Idaho home about these important issues.
Fiscal policy has such a broad range of who they reach now. It's not just the legislature, it's the whole state. And it's a way of people being able to understand how these financial issues can affect them.
I was surprised to find that the center's 10 years old. Congratulations on this milestone.
Congratulations on a 10-year mark, and I look forward to working with you all so that we can continue to provide the research and data analysis so that we can have strong public schools in Idaho.
Congratulations to the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy on 10 awesome years.
It's 10 years. And this is a great opportunity to say happy birthday to everybody in the state of Idaho who benefit.
Paulette of Idaho would like to wish the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy a happy 10-year anniversary.
Congratulations on 10 years. We look forward to continuing our work with you to create a stronger Idaho for everyone.
Happy 10th anniversary to the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy.
So congratulations for 10 great years. Look forward to your 10 more and 10 more and 10 more.
Thank you to all of our partners for their commitment to our work together. I am truly honored to have taken over the leadership of the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy at such a critical time. Over 10 years, the center has influenced economic policy and established itself as a policy leader, even under modest beginnings as one staffer and one laptop. Now, we're still scrappy, but our team of 5 are addressing more issues than ever before. Fiscally speaking, our work helped secure key decisions about our state's future. Preserving the grocery credit helps thousands of Idahoans of modest and low-income means be able to afford their food purchases. And $68 million saved in revenue goes a long way and paves the road for some investments that we know lead to long-term economic growth, like providing a full day of kindergarten to all Idaho school children, which would have cost $42 million, but was passed over this year. $68 million saved could get another year of robust teacher pay raises to keep this important role's salary competitive with our neighboring states and to keep the best teachers for our kids. $68 million can help gain health coverage for thousands of Idahoans, and specifically children in Idaho, so they can get a good start in life. Passage of $175 million in federal rental and utility assistance from the December COVID-19 relief package was something that the center was proud to be able to support. And let me tell you a little bit about how that came together. Idaho was at risk of seeing mass evictions, with rent prices soaring in our area. And once provisions from the March 2020 CARES Act expired, like jobless benefits, the threat was very real. Large numbers of evictions could have cost hundreds of millions of dollars in emergency services, like shelter, medical care, foster and juvenile services, which would have negatively impacted individuals, families, and communities for a really long time. The rental assistance proposal, however, had languished with the budget committees for several weeks, and lawmakers from both sides of the aisle reached out to us with concerns. We created an analysis and worked with advocates and legislation sponsors to create talking points that were used to present this budget bill on the House of the floor and Senate. And that budget bill passed nearly unanimously. Evictions are down 30% in 2020 compared with before. And we are hearing that housing service organizations are resolving eviction cases with the use of these funds. As many as 76,000 Idahoans could ultimately benefit and stay in their homes. The center also helped divert cuts to Medicaid and Medicaid expansion. That's not where the debate around healthcare, however, began in the middle of a pandemic. The governor had initially proposed $30 million in cuts to Medicaid, and here the center informed the debate about how a significant portion of those surplus dollars that people kept talking about were actually additional federal Medicaid dollars. This helped healthcare advocates point out that instead, these could be kept into the program and avert cuts, especially as more federal fiscal support was on the way. The ways we worked over the past year also changed. We deepened and created new strategic partnerships. For example, I am especially proud of collaborating with our friends at Paulette of Idaho to prompt civic engagement around economic issues with Latinx communities. And we are driving citizen engagement in new ways. We reached hundreds of Idahoans this year and help people raise their voice about important issues on revenue and property taxes. We hit the Spanish language radio airwaves and began new digital engagement. Next, it is our vision for Idaho to enact pro-growth economic policies that build our state back better than it was before the pandemic. This will be the work of the center in the next decade and beyond. It's time to center Idaho families in economic policymaking instead of the narrow interests of a few certain sectors. Here are a few things that we have in the works. We are analyzing the vast opportunities in the American Rescue Plan Act, including further rounds of rental and utility assistance, food assistance, education dollars, and state fiscal aid that could be used for roads, water, and other infrastructure. And we plan to educate lawmakers as they eye making decisions about these in the next legislative session. We are building content that can help everyday Idahoans raise their voice about kitchen table economic issues, like a citizen's guide to our tax system and an action toolkit. And finally, we are working with partners to enact a state earned income tax credit, which would let modest families keep more of their earnings and help their families afford household basics. This proven policy has momentum, Missouri just last Friday becoming the 30th state to create this critical credit. We have co-founded the Elevate Idaho Families Coalition with a set of critical partners to make this tax policy a reality in Idaho and to center families in our economic policy making. There are many challenges ahead for our state. People will continue moving into Idaho, creating a demand for high quality public services. And reduced revenue, such as we saw in this past legislative session, risk cuts in the infrastructure that powers our growth, like childcare, schools, roads, broadband, and the state's workforce. And it's students, teachers, small businesses, people who are enrolled in state services, and our families that will bear the brunt of these choices. It's up to us to look forward and plan ahead for these challenges by making robust investments in all of these areas. It's up to us to ensure that our communities can thrive and future generations can do well here. Next, please stay tuned as Advisory Board member Sue Lovelace tells us about how we can do this together. Thank you.
As we've heard today, the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy plays an incredibly important role on behalf of all of us. Our state would be demonstrably worse off but for the work of the incredibly smart women and men behind the research and analysis put out by the center. For many, this year's Idaho legislative session was incredibly frustrating, with legislators pursuing short-sighted policies while declining to advance investments that drive sustained economic growth, such as robust school funding, post-secondary education, and an equitable tax system. The only way to get our state on the right track is to combat the nonsense with data-driven factual analysis about how tax and budget issues affect our lives. That is why I'm supporting the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy. Today, we've celebrated the great work of the last 10 years, and we've learned that the next 10 are going to be even more complex. We need your support to launch into our next 10. Please make a meaningful gift now. Dig deep for two reasons. First, to celebrate 10 years, and second, to stand up for the importance of data and analysis. If you're viewing through the event broadcast page on the Give Butter platform, navigate over to the right where it says Donate. You can also open up a new tab and go to our website, idahocfp.org. I'm going to say that again, idahocfp.org. Once you're there, click on the yellow Donate button. I'm going to pause for a moment while you get to the giving options. Every year, I give to the center because I, and this is embarrassing to admit, have never taken a class in economics. So when I hear the legislature consider a new tax proposal or a change to an education budget, I worry about what that means. I count on the center to provide me with clear, factual information so that I know when I get on the phone with my legislator or sign a petition, I know what I'm talking about. And I know that journalists and legislators count on this same information as they consider the financial implications of legislation. Please join me now in ensuring the center can be the asset that our state needs.